So good afternoon. I am honored to be with you today to talk about primary sources in the classroom. I am sharing transcript from my talk today, and you'll find that in the discussion forum through the portal for this conference. Primary sources and historic documents are important materials for students in the humanities. With From the Page, a dedicated platform, we can read, transcribe, and annotate text and images, establish transcription conventions, and edit work while allowing for deeper connections with primary sources and scholarly literature alike. Join collaborative activities and Q&A sessions today and learn how to select materials for your first crowdsourcing project. Engage your students and share your transcription for use by anyone who would like to access them. My name is Caterina Agostini, and I am a Ph.D. candidate at Rutgers University, where I'm also a digital humanities specialist at Rutgers Digital Humanities Initiative and Lab. My interests as a researcher and an educator are found in digital humanities methods and tools, Italian studies, and scientific texts and illustrations, particularly the scientific text and illustration of this work by Galileo Galilei, the dialogue on the two chief world systems, dating back to 1632, which started the Inquisition trial and so much debate and controversies as well on scientific and theological topics alike. This photo is courtesy of Columbia Digital Library Collections, and it is an image that is compliant with IIIF standards, and that means the International Image Interoperability Framework makes this particular item interoperable, shareable, and implements transcriptions and annotation properties that are unique to this standard. My concentration today is to use resources available to the Rutgers community at Rutgers University libraries and see how we can search for primary sources. And I will start by mentioning that Rutgers University libraries is the first place where we land for a search of primary sources. We can also delve deeper into special collections and university archives that will be normally in the basement of Alexander Library on the College Avenue campus. And we can also rely on the Rutgers University Community Repository, also known as RUCore, where sources are shared. Let me spend a few words to explain how these online catalogs connect to each other. So the first one, Rutgers University Libraries, is the wider comprehensive collection of physical and digital materials available at Rutgers, whereas special collections and university archives is a dedicated section that has manuscripts, ancient and more contemporary documents, manuscripts, printed texts, images, but also realia that can relate very well to language and history training for our students at Rutgers. At this moment, it is not possible to access special collections in person, but there is a way to work around this temporary restriction because Rutgers University Community Repository has digitized some of these highlights in the collections. And this type of solution could be very, very effective for working during the pandemic, but it could be very, very useful for later pedagogical practices as well. For instance, assets of this work with primary sources include the possibility to show digital items on RUCore, to work on digital editions and projects with scholars and students in your classes, and to show later collection items in person once it is safe to go back to campus and gather in a group. I think that this integration of physical and digital conversations can be incredibly productive for classes in the humanities in a sense to expand the connection with general information and scholarly readings that are assigned throughout the semester. And I will show an example of this where I build from my interest in the Renaissance and early modern period in Italian studies to look at two primary sources from Rutgers University Special Collection and University Archives. And I chose to show you an excerpt of the Oberon Mask from Ben Jonson's folio dating back to 1616, and the first page of the Areopagitica by John Milton that was printed in 1644. And you can see we have a digital object identifier that is shared at the bottom of this slide and also at page 2 of the handout that I shared in the discussion forum. Using primary sources can expand the reading canon for humanities classes, and it can also teach editorial practices to students who may or may not have thought about it before. There is one tool in particular that I would like to explore with you today, and that is called From the Page. It is a transcription tool in the sense that we use it to transcribe ourselves. There are other tools that I could have mentioned, and I will refer briefly to one of them called Transcribus, and that is spelled Transkribus. And that tool has been developed by the Humanities Department of the Government of Austria to carry on automatic character recognition. So in a way, it's optical character recognition that's applied to handwritten text. It is a valuable tool. However, I believe it is perhaps addressing scholarly needs more clearly, because you need to train the tool with thousands of transcription that you are actually informing and entering yourself. Therefore, for the purposes of a pedagogical application, I will concentrate instead on transcriptions that we enter as scholars in the humanities. And for those reasons, From the Page works extremely well. It is a portal where primary sources are definitely the main focus of attention. And those sources could be historic documents, texts, illustrated text, you name it. Anything that has a textual component is definitely welcome on From the Page. And images are important elements to consider there as well. I am founding my methodological insights here on a work using primary sources, hands-on instructional exercises by Anne Bade, Eders, Smedberg, and Meti Taormina, and also on an ongoing project by the Library of Congress, Getting Started with Primary Sources, where activities are developed and shared with educators at all levels to engage a closer connection with textual and visual sources and foster an authentic connection with the materials, with the instructor, and also with peers. Let me now tell you that our walkthrough demo is intended to show what collaboration means in a pedagogical context, what role digital media have in this pedagogical project, and how connections with primary sources and scholarly literature can be increased and made more explicit for our students. A first sample I am sharing with you today is from a digital collaborative project, La Sfera Challenge, in which I collaborated with Dr. Laura Morial, Dr. Bear Alberton, and other scholars in North America and Europe. While we were working with primary sources on From the Page, we saw that a number of humanistic practices were encouraged at the same time. For instance, textual portions of a manuscript, specifically the book titled La Sfera by a Renaissance author, Gorodati. Those textual portions could be transcribed by a group of people. So in our case, we divided up the text so that each person had an assigned number of folios to transcribe. Collaboration was vital in that sense because such enterprise would not be possible for one person to complete in a timely manner. And that collaboration took the shapes of editing, commenting, and interacting for what eventually became a digital edition. Additional sections on the software allowed us to have other primary sources. So for myself, I was working on the Yale Beinecke manuscript 328, whereas other scholars were working with manuscripts housed at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France or other libraries in the US and Europe. So we had the benefit of comparing those sources and seeing what the same text had to say in other manuscript copies. And we could also have discussions on variants, similarities, illustrations that were missing or that were represented differently, and so on and so forth. As a result of this collaboration, we had an online repository of primary sources from different libraries, but also scholarly literature, where we share different materials with different project team members, and all of us had access to the same repository. The visual elements were sometimes absent, sometimes very important, as in the Yale Beinecke manuscript, where you can see that the illustration is sometimes a narrative element. So we were able to annotate and integrate those visual elements into the digital edition as well. And you can see at the bottom here, we have square brackets describing what the image top, the left, and the left margin have as phytomorphic decoration and their colors. As a result of that, we also found that From the Page has transcription conventions that are universally suggested for digital projects, but each team had the freedom to update those transcriptions based on what the primary sources actually had to suggest for us in each case. And as a result of our work, we had transcriptions for use for anyone who would like to access the transcription of this Renaissance Italian text. We implemented those From the Page, and we accompanied those materials with dossier narratives where we explain our editorial practices. And finally, we had a project that we were happy to archive through the digital documentation process, and you can find a link at page 3 of the handout. And so we had a DOI available for this project itself. At the scholarly level, this is certainly a digital decision that brings benefits, but how can this also benefit our students? And I would like to stop my PowerPoint presentation here and share with you some explorations of La Sfera Challenge. One from the view. Well, I hope this is actually working, because I want to show you how actually the project looks once someone is in it. So I will open a page. View has an image of the manuscript and the transcription that was achieved for it. And you can see that actually clicking on the image brings us a form where we have a facsimile and a transcription for this. And the image has IIIF standards, which means I can zoom in and explore details in the clearest form possible. And I can also compare that with other manuscripts. On the right, you have the transcription itself. And I'll zoom out of this view to show you the collaborative aspect is clearly encouraged here, because you can actually see the versions that exist for these transcriptions. So you can see all people who contributed to this view. So for example, you can see Laura, you can see myself, and you can see other colleagues who took part to this project. So each version is actually saved. The overview version will have the transcription and fields for notes and questions where people interact. And this is the type of approach that I would like to bring into the classroom, so that students can have a real hands-on experience with primary sources, complementing those views that come traditionally from textbooks or companion to humanities studies. I will now refer to my slide deck once more to say that From the Page is a relatively new transcription and portal for primary sources. And the way to access it is that you want to set up a trial account. And normally that works along with an email to the developers, Ben and Sarah Broomfield. And they will actually discuss it with you to see how the platform can work for you and your projects for primary sources in your humanities classes. You can join ongoing projects. And so in that case, you will browse their collections, and you can find any source of American, European, or world history there. In that case, you transcribe for free and you'll sign up for a guest account. However, if you post your own sources or other sources that are not available on the portal yet, a commercial version is needed, and there is not a one version fit all. There needs to be a discussion with the developers of the website. Your students anyway would have access to From the Page for free, because they would be transcribers, whereas the person who is collaborating at a scholarly level may have some fees to cover. And again, that's on a base need. So there is. I wish I had a better answer for you. There is just a conversation that needs to be started with From the Page with our team. If that is a hindrance, and I hope it certainly is not, I also want to share with you that there are other digital platforms that you can explore, and I refer to those on page 3 at the bottom. And I'm thinking about Scalar and Omeka, that are also digital platforms, and you can have primary sources integrated and discussed there for your class. And if you're interested in image standards for interoperability, IIIF is a good reference to have, and I'm also sharing a link to that. And I will end a little earlier because I really want to hear more from you and share my contact. I'm happy to follow up on your humanistic and digital explorations of digital and physical items that belong to the humanities, to galleries, libraries, and museums. And I'm happy to discuss this with you now. And I thank you for your time and attention.